So the first approach to value that we want to talk about is the sales comparison approach. It is the one you will do most often as a real estate agent. What kind of property do you think you're going to deal with most often as a real estate agent? Residential. Absolutely. So it is the one you moved. Oh, you don't want to be a star? Back of your head. So the sales comparison approach is the one you'll do most often as a broker because you deal with residential property more often than anything else. So when you see on this slide or in your notes, sales comparison equals residential, this is what you're going to use to value residential property. Always. It would be great if, honestly, if we could value every property using the sales comparison approach. But we can't because the sales comparison approach relies on us having something to compare to. And the something that we want to compare to are recently sold, very similar properties. And so the problem we run into is things like special use properties. And special use properties are things like churches and schools and police stations and fire departments. And all. How often do they sell? Very rarely. So you don't have anything to compare with there. So we can't use a sales comparison approach for special use properties. And the problem with income producing properties is the very similar part. It's very hard to find. You might find 2 car washes, but one may do 100 cars a day and the other one does 300 cars a day. And so it's very hard to make that comparison. So they're too dissimilar. So the sales comparison approach is probably the best approach to value for everything if the other stuff would cooperate, but it doesn't. Residential property works really well with the sales comparison approach because it sells a lot. There's always lots of comps, comparable properties that have recently sold. And it's easy to make comparisons with because at the end of the day, houses, you can usually find other very similar houses in the area. The other thing I want you to add to your notes about the sales comparison approach is it works really well for one other type of property in addition to residential, vacant land. Vacant land is very easily valued using the sales comparison approach. Said another way, the sales comparison approach is the best approach to value for residential property and vacant land. That word right there, 4 letters, most important word on that slide. Sold. The sales comparison approach is based on us comparing our subject property. And when we're doing valuation, the thing we're trying to value is always called the subject property. Comparing our subject property to other recently sold properties, not on the market. Why would we want to use on the market things as comparisons? We don't know what the value is, right? Somebody, because if they were, it would have already sold for that, right? We don't know what the final market price of that property is going to be. We don't want to use one market value to predict another market value. We want to use market price to predict market value. Market price means things they actually sold, right? So we want recently sold, very similar. The more similar, the better. The more recently sold, the better. A big part of answering test questions right when it comes to valuation is choosing the right comps. So when it comes to choosing comparable properties or comps, the first thing you want to look for are they similar? Are they similar in size? Are they similar in style? Style being more important than size. You don't want to compare, either in real life or on a test, a ranch house with a 2-story house. Don't do it. Ranches get compared to ranches. 2 stories get compared to 2 stories. Split levels get compared to split levels. So style is very important when you're choosing comps. How recent it sold is very important. We'd much rather have a house that's 200 square feet bigger that sold last week than a house that's the same size that sold 6 months ago. So more recent is better. The fewer adjustments you have to make in general, the better the comp is. Another big one to look for when you're choosing comps, you don't ever want to choose a comparable sale that has weird, funky things going on with it, especially for test-taking purposes. Now, in the real world, do we include foreclosures? Yes, we have to, because they affect the value of those properties. On a test, if you're choosing a comp, and it gives you, and one of the choices is the same size, the same year built, it sold last month, but it sold quickly due to an illness in the family. Are you going to choose that as a comp? No. Conditions of the sale. That's what that's called. It's called conditions of the sale. If anything funky is going on with the conditions of the sale, you want to eliminate it as a comp, especially for test purposes. Okay? Don't use it. Just don't use it. All right? So some other factors for selecting your comparable properties, it should be an arm's length transaction. Here's what that means. Don't use comps that I sold it to my sister. As we said earlier, we probably didn't get a true market value for that property. If they're related, the buyer and the seller anyway, you don't want to use that as a comp. Of course, it should be as similar as possible. You should use 3 or more. 3, no more than 5 or 6 at most. At least 3, hopefully. With the fewest adjustments possible. And then this last one down here, we never average when we do a CMA. And we're going to talk about the mechanics of a CMA here in just a second. When you do a CMA, the whole goal is to give somebody a value for their property, right? And you want to tell them, this is what your property's worth. But you're not qualified to give them an exact number. You're qualified to give them something called a range of value. Now, appraisers give them an exact number. They don't do it through averaging. They don't just average the numbers together. There's a process called correlation that they go through. But for you, if comps 1, 2, and 3 yield 3 different numbers, your range is going to be lowest to highest. Property's worth somewhere between this number and this number. It's called a range of value. And that's how you report your findings on a CMA. You don't ever give one number because you're just not that good. You're not qualified to do that. Right? And that's what we got right here on the slide. Usually in the case of range versus specific value, you should refer to current and expired listings, but you don't want to use them. You want to use recently sold. Okay? And that you're expected to provide this service to every client you have. Turn your book to page 403 real quick. And we're going to take a look at that CMA. We're going to talk about the mechanics of doing a CMA and how you make adjustments when you do a CMA. All right, page 403 in your book. That is a comparative market analysis. First of all, how many comps do we have in this CMA? 5 of them. The subject property is at 155 Potter Drive, and then they've got comps A, B, C, D, and E right there. If you notice, we start with the sales price of each one of the comps, right? Have a column, we start with the sale, what that comp sold for. Because that's our best indication of the value of it, right? What it sold for. And then what do you notice we start doing with those sales prices?
Adjusting them.
We adjust them. We adjust them up. We adjust them down. And then if you look at the bottom of each one of those columns, for each comp, we've got an adjusted value. Does everybody see that? Sometimes that's called an indicated value. It means the same thing, adjusted or indicated value. And so each comp is going to produce an indicated value. You're not going to stop with one though, you're going to do it for all of them. You're going to make these adjustments for all of them, and then your value range for that property is going to be based on those adjusted values. Here's the idea of making adjustments. We've chosen the comps that were the most similar we could possibly find. But are they identical? No. You're never going to find really identical properties. Maybe you get real close on a condo development, but usually there's some difference between the two. We try to account for that difference through the adjustment process. What would a buyer be willing to pay more for this property or less for this property because of this thing? And that's an adjustment we need to make, right? So let's talk about how we make adjustments. I want everybody, I know it's going to seem silly, but trust me, method to the madness. Hold up your two hands just like this in front of you. Your left hand, this left, one on this side. This is your subject property. It cannot move. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it is locked in place. Never moves. This hand is free to move. If this is your subject, what's in this hand? Your comp. So which one are we adjusting? Comps. Which one never gets adjusted? The subject. This one doesn't move. What we have to ask ourselves continually on every single facet of that property, is our comp better, superior to our subject, or worse, inferior to our subject? Does everybody follow that? And then we want to do our best to make them equal again. So let's take this for an example. Let's say I have a house. My subject property is 2,000 square feet. Well, I'm locked right here at 2,000, right? I can't move with my subject property. My comparable property is 2,200 square feet. Is it up here or is it down here? Which one is it? 2,000 over here and 2,200 over here. It's up here, right? So, which way do I, keep it in mind, I cannot adjust my subject. I can only adjust on this side. Which way do I have to adjust to make them even? Down. It's a negative adjustment. I have to subtract value from the sales price of that comparable property, because the only way I can make them even is to adjust my comp down. Does everybody follow that? That's why I say there's method to the madness of holding your hands out and looking like an idiot for 5 seconds. Because it reminds you, I can't change my subject property. This one's locked, so I've got to make the adjustment over here. Which way do I need to go? Up or down? So if in a situation where my comp is inferior to or worse than my subject, I'm down here, it's going to be a positive adjustment. I'm going to add value. Subject has a fireplace. Boom. Comp, no fireplace. What am I going to do? I'm going to add, what am I adding? The value of what? A fireplace. What a fireplace costs? What? What kind of value?
What's somebody to pay for it?
What a buyer be willing to pay for a fireplace. If given 2 identical homes that one had a fireplace and one didn't, what would the buyer be willing to pay, more or less, for the fireplace? If it's $1,500 more, then it's going to be a $1,500 positive adjustment, right? Because what we're doing is adding in a fireplace. We're trying to make these be as even as possible by adding in the value of a fireplace. Does everybody sort of follow that? And we're going to do that for every, you can do it for 1,000 different things on houses. I mean, you can do it for granite countertops, and you can do it for, tile floors versus hardwood floors. You can do it for landscaping. You can do it for, hardy plank siding versus vinyl siding in the real world. On the test, usually these are the things they're going to expect you to be able to adjust. Square footage. Almost always, they're going to be square footage adjustments. There's usually going to be adjustments for one or both of bathrooms and garages. And usually some kind of adjustment for condition. So let's talk about the bathrooms and garage. Well, let's talk about square footage first. We'll kind of go down the list there. Let's talk about square footage. That's the most common adjustment. It's very rare to have 2 comparable properties that are exact same size. So, usually they will give you, on a test question, the adjustment amounts. They will say, square footage is to be adjusted at, or square footage is valued at $75 per square foot. Everybody follow me? So, if we have a subject property is 2,000 square feet, and a comp is 2,200 square feet. Well, first of all, which way is our, go ahead and decide which direction we're going. Are we going up or are we going down? We're going down. We need to, in essence, remove 200 square feet from that comparable property, right? We can't remove the 200 square feet, so we can remove the value of 200 square feet. So we know it's going to be a negative adjustment, and it's going to be a negative adjustment of 200 square feet times $75 a square foot. Is that 15,000? So that would be a negative $15,000 adjustment. That means whatever the sales price of the comp was, let's say it was $200,000 that it sold for, we would subtract minus 15,000. So our indicated value based on that one comp and that one adjustment would actually be $185,000.
Do we ever base comps off of purchaser, the buyer's wants?
So how do you mean?
Like they want a smaller house. So typically a bigger house is better, but they want a smaller house, they want less bathrooms, they don't want granite, they don't want.
Well, so the house we're valuing over here is one they've already chosen, if you're working with a buyer.
Okay.
Does that make sense? The one we're trying to value, if you're working with a buyer, is the one that they want to make an offer on. So we're trying to find ones that are similar to that type of house that they've already chosen.
Gotcha.
Is everybody okay on that? Right? So that's how you make an adjustment for square footage. Let's look at one that's going to confuse you. I have a subject property that is 2.5 baths. I have a comparable property that sold for $315,000 and is 3 baths. And the only thing we know about this property is that buyers are willing to pay for a full bath $8,000, for a half bath $5,000. Those are our adjustment values. Now, let me first ask you the question. Which one, or is our comp superior to or inferior to our subject? It's superior. Subject's here at 2.5, right? Comp is up here at 3. So our overall adjustment is going to be in what direction? Down. Easy enough. We're going down. Down by what? Nick says down by $5,000.
I feel like that's the obvious wrong.
Yeah.
It's so obvious,
It's a
right?
trick question.
It's so obviously wrong.
Down 1 and then up a half.
Let me ask you a question. Think of what a full bathroom is and a half bathroom. A half bathroom is what? A sink,
No shower.
toilet, right? Full bathroom is a sink and a toilet and some kind of bathing apparatus, right? If I have a 3-bath house, that's 3 toilets, 3 sinks, 3 bathing spots, right? If I take out a half bath, which is a toilet and a sink, I just have one bathroom that has nothing but a bathing spot in it. Is that actually what's going on in a 2.5 bath house?
Is to take a bath and add a half.
I got to do it in 2 steps. Exactly. They're 2 separate things because a half bath is not half of a full bath. They're 2 separate entities. And so what actually we have here is 2 separate adjustments. Does everybody follow that? What we have here is a subject that's a 2 full and a 1 half bath. Is everybody with me on that? Versus a 3 full. So now let's compare them individually. Subject, 2 full right here. Comp, 3 full up here, right? Which way are we coming? Down. Down by the value of what? Just make those two things equal. Take out a full back. Does everybody see that? Minus $8,000. But now, subject, half bath. Comp, no half bath. Which way are we adjusting? Up by what? The value of a half bath, which is $5,000. Is there anybody that doesn't see? And it's okay if you don't. But do y'all see why it has to be in 2 steps like that?
It makes sense. I just wonder how complicated could it get?
No more complicated than that on the test.
All right.
Garages, though, same way. A 1-car garage and a 2-car garage, they're not half of each other. They're 2 separate things. So if you wanted to adjust from a house with a 1-car, so you had a subject with a 2-car garage and a comp with a 1-car garage, you would have to subtract out the 2-car garage and add back the 1-car garage.
But assuming they give us different numbers.
Values, right, for each one, and they will.
Okay.
Does everybody see that? So it's what we call a 2-step adjustment. Now, as you get smarter and better, you'll learn to recognize it's just going to be the difference between those two. It's a net adjustment. You don't actually have to do it in 2 steps, but until you really get that hammered home, do it in 2 steps. So overall, that's going to be minus 3,000, 315 minus 3,000. So your indicated value would be $312,000. Is everybody okay on that? See why it's 2 steps. You understand how garages would work the same way. You can't just, if it's for, I've got a subject property that's a 2-car garage, and my comp is a 1-car. I cannot add the value of a 1-car. First thing I have to do is add the value of a 2-car, and then subtract out the value of a 1-car. Get them back even. Because they're 2 separate things. Right? That's as weird as these adjustments get. We okay on that? And as you do them, you'll settle into it a little bit. Okay. Last adjustment you may see. So add this to your list of things that are very commonly adjusted. Remember, the rules for selecting comps are we want recently sold, and the more similar the better, and the more recently sold the better we are. Sometimes, though, we can't find things that just sold last month. Sometimes we have to go back 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. If we do that, generally we need to make a time adjustment. Does everybody follow that? Because the market has changed over that period of time. Sometimes in these test questions, they'll say, okay, you have comp that sold for $250,000 6 months ago. And you have your subject property, and they describe your subject property, and there'll be several other adjustments you'll be making. But I'm just isolating it down to one right now. Your comp sold for $250,000 6 months ago in a neighborhood that is appreciating at 3% annually. 3% annual appreciation.
So can we assume it's 1.5%?
You could, if you just wanted to just look at it, 6 months and half of a year. Since Dustin wants to cheat, it sold 5 months ago.
I just didn't know if we were subtracting.
No, you're exactly right. Okay. So, 3% annual well, first of all, is appreciation an increase in value or a decrease in value? So which way are we gonna be making this adjustment on our sales price for our comp? It's not opposite on that one, it's exactly what you think it is. Appreciation is up. That's why we kind of separate these out and go through them, yeah? Appreciation is gonna be a positive adjustment. In other words, what we're saying is that if this property sold now, it would sell for more because it's appreciated in value since that time. Does everybody follow that? So, there's a couple ways to do this. You can take, the way I usually do it, is simply take 3%, take the annual appreciation, it's sort of like prorating at this point, you know? Take my sales price of $250,000 times 3%, and then, what is that, 7,500, is that right? That's my annual appreciation, and I would divide that by 12, and then multiply it times 5 to get 5 months worth of appreciation on that property, which is how much? $31.25. So that's going to be a positive adjustment of $31.25, which gets added back to my sales price. So my indicated value would actually be $253,125.
Here's my thing, so test-wise, they're gonna give us these
Adjustment.
adjustments to work with.
Yep.
Where do we get these?
In the real world, from people more experienced than you. Well, you got, that's what you go to a broker and charge for. You go to the more experienced brokers in your area.
But these aren't exact numbers.
These are not exact. It's very subjective. That's why it's an opinion of value. They're very subjective, and you can get different adjustments from different. One of the things I really highly recommend once you get in the real world is a service, at least in our area, called the Triangle Area Residential Report, the TAR report, that your firm can join, or you can join as an individual broker. Like we pay for it for all of our agents, and it's done by a Triangle appraiser. And basically, he feeds all of his current adjustments for every neighborhood, by neighborhood, into this system. So when you need to do these things, you can go in and you can find current square footage adjustments and current sales data and you know, how things are selling as a comparison to market value to tax value in all these neighborhoods. And so it's a tremendous resource for finding these kinds of adjustments.
So he just drives around and
That's all he does
Find
full time,
sales.
right? He basically does fake appraisals all the time and creates this system, and then everybody subscribes to it.
it's genius.
It's great. I mean, and it's so worth the $100 a month that I pay for it as an agent, because it gives me direct access. Because what it allows me to do, I mean, I can do adjustments in Diamond Creek where I've sold 1,000 houses over the years. You know, I can do a CMA in there, and I can be within $100, not $100, $1,000 of what an appraiser would come up with. But you send me in a neighborhood I've never seen before, I can pull all the data, but so much of this is subjective. I'm going to get a lot more loose around the edges. You know what I mean? If it's a neighborhood I'm not. But with that, so it just gives you more of a direct line to somebody who's doing the research all the time on all. And those services exist in every market. So, I mean, there's somebody doing that pretty much everywhere. You just have to find them.
For instance, it's an opinion, he's not liable for that.
No, he's not liable for it. I mean, and that's why you make clear to your clients, look, this is an opinion of value, but it is based on recent sales data. And so what he has computer algorithms that compare. We're looking for the adjustment for square footage. Well, he's got a computer that's compared the last 50 sales in that neighborhood and taken the land value out, so that he's isolated essentially what somebody was paying for the square footage, and it, based on those 50 sales that have happened over the last 3 years, this is the square footage adjustment. Well, that's a pretty good number, and you can get it just like that. Whereas if I was doing it manually, I'd have to go pull those 50 sales, I'd have to take the land value out each one individually, and then I'd have to come up with $1 per square foot, and then I'd have to take all those together and average them out to figure an average per square foot adjustment. It'd take me 3 hours to come up with that adjustment number, whereas I can just go in there and there it is, $76 a square foot. Boom. It's worth the money. worth it for sure. Okay? I should get like a commission from Stacy for advertising this product, right?
We'll take his class.
Stacy, I think some. All right, so is everybody good on how to make these adjustments? All right, they are really not complex. Let's find out how good you are. I want you to do, I'm gonna pass out this, and I want you to work on number 1 for me. Shouldn't take you more than 5-6 minutes or so.
You just say we just do number one.
Just number 1. Right now. You already got one?
Yeah.
Valuation calculations? That's one. Down there.